So Joe, yesterday I had the opportunity to teach a short class on knockout value proposition.
Okay.
Right. And, it doesn't matter what business you're in, being able to differentiate yourself is incredibly important. And as a component of that, there's this idea in marketing and branding called positioning. Right. And today I thought it would be fun to walk our listeners through 6 C's of positioning their brand as realtors in their industry, to give them a sense of value proposition that can really just differentiate them from competition. These come from the book Get to Aha by Andy Cunningham. Andy's a master. She was a right hand to Steve Jobs in marketing the Mac computer and even the iPhone, and then has served as a consultant to other Fortune 100 companies. So definitely pick up this book, Get to Aha, and let's just walk through these 6 C's. That sound like a plan?
Yeah, I love it. And this is a great topic because whether you're a brand new agent breaking your way into the industry or an established agent looking to take more market share, it's imperative that you know what your value proposition is and you know how to articulate that to your client base so that you can earn their business.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times we don't take the time to actually step back and analyze, are we actually living out the value proposition that we think we have? Right. We internalize it a lot of times and we don't actually know how to communicate it. And that's a challenge. What is your elevator pitch? What is your positioning statement? So let's just kind of walk through these 6 C's. The first one is core.
Okay.
And what Andy means by core is, what is your corporate DNA or your company DNA? Now, you might be sitting there thinking, I don't know. What does that even mean? Andy describes 3 different kinds of DNA. Okay. And she says every single company in every single industry falls into these types of DNA. You have customer-oriented companies, you have product-oriented companies, and you have concept-oriented companies. And let me it might be helpful if I give an example of each one of these companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a customer-oriented company would be a company like Zappos. Have you ever ordered from Zappos?
No, I haven't.
I haven't either. And it's crazy because people are just absolutely obsessed with Zappos. And Zappos is known as someone who everything they do is completely about the customer and the customer experience. The customer's always right, even when they're wrong, right? They are obsessive over the reviews that their customers give them about their experience. And even when Amazon started to make a shift in becoming a customer-oriented company in their DNA, they acquired Zappos as a way of adjusting, of changing their own corporate DNA. And Andy talks about that. Product-oriented is a company that is primarily about the utilitarian function of their product. Okay, so like a Microsoft.
Legos came to mind.
Legos. Yeah.
I don't know why.
No, I think that's a great example. Legos it's all about the functionality of the product itself and how are people using those things. A concept oriented, and I think we all probably have the same company that comes to mind. I'm just curious, what comes to mind? If I say a concept oriented, what company comes to mind?
Tesla.
Yeah. Okay.
Tesla.
So Elon Musk is the concept oriented czar right now. And what a concept oriented company's mission is to actually change the fundamental behavior of a population. Elon Musk probably doesn't care that much actually about his electric cars or about his spacecraft. What he cares about is changing the ways that humans behave. And that's what concept oriented companies are concerned with. So I mean, how does this pertain to real estate?
I was just about to ask, how do we apply this specifically? And so as I'm listening to you talk, obviously a customer-oriented business, that's plays a huge role in what we do as real estate professionals. both lead generating for new customers and maintaining existing relationships and providing a great experience for our customers as they go through the process of purchasing or selling a home. And then I think product oriented, I mean, to an extent, real estate is our product, right? The actual property itself. So, I mean, does it almost end up being a combination of both in the real estate industry?
Well, what I think is interesting is I went in just like you thinking, okay, the majority of realtors are customer oriented and some are probably product oriented because they think of their product as, the service that they provide or the home that they sell. And yet it was funny in class, it was a newer realtor that actually spoke up and she actually said, I'm a concept oriented business. And I said, tell me more about that, because I was really curious what she meant by that. And she stayed extremely committed to this idea that her desire as a business was to change the behavior that people, how they thought about real estate. And she said, my positioning statement is going to revolve around getting people to think about real estate not as their home per se, but as the pathway to building wealth.
Oh, okay.
And I actually really loved how she was staying committed to this
Sure.
idea that I'm out to actually change the behavior of the consumer and how they view real estate.
Yeah, I like that.
So I think you can actually be any of the three, but it's important for you to do some work here to really understand, because Andy says in her book that you can't, it's really difficult to adjust your DNA as a company. And this is where your positioning, your branding, your marketing all needs to start. So that's the first C. And identifying your DNA is incredibly important. The second thing when you're positioning your brand is category. Understanding the category that you are in. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're talking to realtors on this podcast.
Right.
Realtors, real estate investors, that is the category. And I don't think we need to spend a lot of time there unless you have thoughts.
Well, the only thing I would add is, depending on how long you've been established, you may even want to consider a more niche market within the real estate category.
Yeah.
Right. So some real estate agents and most real estate agents, work with any buyers, any sellers kind of thing. Some teams and some individuals choose to work with very specific niches. They create their marketing and they, excuse me, all of their branding.
Yeah. All of these different niches can be incredibly important and actually provide you additional, authority in that space, if you will.
Right. And so by identifying a more specific category, you can then build your whole plan around how do I directly communicate with this audience, and the messaging and the type of communication is all crafted specifically to go where they're looking and to speak the language that they are going to be attracted to.
So what are some of those niches that come to mind for you?
Well, the very first thing I think you mentioned was investing, for example. And this goes right back to the core and to what the agent said about being, on a mission to change the way people think. But even within the category of real estate, I look at investors as being a category or a target audience. And so the way I'm going to target them, where I'm going to find them, the messaging and the content and the access and the service that I can provide to an investor, and somebody that's specifically looking for investment properties is probably a little bit different than my retail buyer or seller.
Definitely.
So that's one super easy example. Some people get as specific as, getting into geographic farms, getting into only buyers or only sellers or only first-time home buyers or only military relocation, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all these different kind of subcategories within the real estate industry that I think you don't necessarily have to identify, but I think a lot of teams have had a lot of success by finding that target audience and then maximizing the resources and getting a vast majority of their business from that one source.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that starts to get into the next C, which is community. Who are you serving within that category? Okay, so your category is investors. Now, who are these investors that you're servicing? Are they new investors? Are they experienced investors? Or is it both, right? You really have to know who you're serving so that you can infiltrate that community. And beyond that, I think that a lot of times, especially when real estate agents are thinking about their elevator pitch, their value prop, their positioning statement, whatever we're going to call it, you have to remember that it's not just the person or people that are buying and selling that are your community. The community is also whoever is influential in the actual purchase of your product or service. Okay.
Really important point. Give us an example, David.
So like lenders, right? Lenders could be upstream from your from the house purchase, title, insurance. It's important that you're developing community within all of those different spectrums, and that your positioning statement speaks to them.
I go to, in my head, I think about like probate and estate attorneys. I think about other like niches like that, other people that have influence in the market, that, financial advisors, right? People that are telling other people what to do with their money, right? Exactly. That'd be like a pretty obvious example of like, geez, how do I get in front of these people, create a relationship and a community within that group of people so that the business continues to flow within the whole group of us.
Exactly. And I think that's where it can become even more powerful than just a positioning statement that speaks to the buyers and sellers. When you can actually speak to the people who are responsible for your buyers or sellers' behavior, then you really start seeing leads flow in. And I think that's powerful.
And just let me reemphasize the importance of having these people in your back pocket, because our consumers oftentimes rely on us to connect them with the right title company, the right lender, the right insurance agent. And if you connect them with somebody who does not do a good job, in a lot of ways that reflects on you. I was just talking to a consumer, actually, a buyer who had this very experience, working with a real estate agent, a friend of hers, and long story short, got connected with a lender that did not do a great job. And so it's important that as professionals, we have those professional resources and we've built out enough of a community around us so that we can say with confidence, hey, David, you should call my lender friend so-and-so.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. What's the next C?
So now we get into the competition. So who else is in the marketplace doing what we're doing? Who are we competing with for the same business?
Yeah, totally. And so knowing how they're positioning is going to be incredibly important. So for example, yesterday in my class, I gave an example of a company who I would say is also concept oriented, in that they're trying to adjust the behavior of consumers to make home buying and selling a click of a button online, completely void of a fiduciary, right? That is your competition, and that's how they are positioning. And so you and I need to make sure that our positioning statement has something that can combat that. If that is a primary competitor of yours, then you have to make sure that you are positioned well against that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you used that example, because competition's not always as obvious as the real estate agent across the street. Sometimes it's more like, well, who's trying to disrupt the entire industry? How are they doing it? What is their value proposition? And how does that change or does it my value proposition? I
couldn't agree more. And I think that as you're doing this competitive analysis, it could be a useful exercise for you to identify a concept-oriented competitor, a product-oriented competitor, and a customer-oriented, and ask yourself how you are positioned against each of those.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
So the next C, the fifth C, is context. Okay. All right. And context has to do with the point in time, the historic landscape in the industry that you are positioning in.
Great timing for that conversation.
Exactly. So, I mean, easy, low-hanging fruit here is how did top agents position themselves at the outset of COVID? When COVID hit, and I said this yesterday, the most successful agents across the country were those people who positioned themselves as the virtual option, providing safety to the consumer. The faster that pivot was made and the faster that marketing got pushed out to the consumer, the better those agents performed. And so you saw every single top agent, when you popped onto their website, there was a pop-up that came up showing you how they were keeping consumers safe in a virtual environment.
Yeah, and one of the things we learned was the people that did not adapt to the context of their message were left behind, because their consumers were getting messages from them that felt very insincere because they were on autopilot and they were not specifically adjusted for the context of the moment.
Exactly.
And so the message lands flat, your consumer's kind of turned off or irritated, or at bare minimum ignores the message, which is obviously not why we're doing it in the first place.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about the context too is all of these C's have to do with authenticity. And this is gonna lead into the last C. But the whole magic behind marketing is that if it's authentic to who the business is, then this all works. It all works together. However, if you try forcing any of these C's and you come up with a positioning statement that really isn't authentic to who you are, the consumer's going to know and pick up on it. I mean, we're talking about the context. And do you remember how many emails that you got from companies that were trying to make this effort of being sincere and being relevant, and it just fell flat? Yeah. I mean, here's the classic example. Don't ask me why I was getting Victoria's Secret's emails. However, when Victoria's Secret emailed me about how much they cared for me during COVID, I was like, okay, one, mail, not your client. Two, I don't care how you're keeping me safe with
lingerie,
right?
Underwear,
right. It just didn't feel authentic to what the business was trying to do, and so I think you really have to understand who your client is. When you're making this communication out, when you're marketing,
which goes right back into understanding your category and community. And understanding the subsets within.
Exactly.
It's so important as it kind of all comes together as we're talking through it. And so really what I think you're getting to, David, is you've really got to start at the beginning of this pattern with core and work through category in sequential order as we've outlined them here today.
I really think that's what Andy's going for. And so that last C is criteria. And really the question that you're asking is, do I have the right positioning statement to put out to the consumer? Does it align with who I am, who our business truly is? Perhaps your business has a stated set of core values. Really, you're just going back and you're evaluating what you've come up with as an organization to make sure it matches who you really are. Otherwise, you're going to end up with insincere, inauthentic messaging.
And as we're looking at these 6 C's, I'm thinking to myself, core, category, community are probably going to be things that you determine up front and probably don't change a whole lot over the course of your business. Whereas competition, context, and criteria very well may change over time. Depending on what the tech industry is doing in real estate, our competition changes and their value proposition evolves. Depending on current events and, pandemics, the context that our message lives in evolves. The real estate market, as that evolves, that changes the context of our messaging. And so then, of course, that all affects the criteria.
That's a great observation, one that I hadn't made, and I think that that's something that will serve everyone really well. So here's the deal, guys. You have to define your value. You have to differentiate from the competition. And these 6 C's help you provide a guide, a roadmap to really creating an impactful positioning statement so that you can understand your place in your industry. So I hope this is helpful. I hope people will pick up the book, Getting to Aha by Andy Cunningham. And I think that's all we have for today.
I love it. I love the intentionality behind this episode and this content for our listeners. After you get through learning the mechanics of how do I buy and sell real estate, it comes down to your performance as a business owner is going to be what dictates your growth or lack thereof. And these type of exercises, they're so important because they keep you focused on, am I doing everything I can as a business owner very intentionally at a high level to continue to expand with whatever vision you have. In doing it intentionally, whatever that outcome is. And so this is a great exercise. And like you said, I think that our listeners are going to take this and put it into action as they do on this podcast.
I think so too. Guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, go play All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.